Well now, life throws you some curves, and sometimes those curves involve your offspring making questionable decisions. My Brenda Sue, bless her heart, she went through a phase. I have a car phase, and not just any car, mind you. It had to be flashy. Now, I'm not one to tell folks how to spend their money. If you want a vehicle that screams, look at me. Well, that's your prerogative. But when my sensible Brenda Sue, the one who always drove that perfectly good beige sedan, suddenly announces she's trading it in for something called a red Porsche, well, a body's got to raise an eyebrow, or two. This wasn't just any red, you understand. It was the kind of red that would make a fire engine blush. And the Porsche, well, it sounded fast just saying the word. Faster than anything Brenda Sue had ever driven, unless you count that time she was late for church potluck. I tried to be supportive. I really did. I said, honey, that's vibrant, which, in my vocabulary, is about as enthusiastic as I get about something that looks like it belongs on a racetrack, not picking up groceries. But Brenda Sue, she was smitten. Said it handled like a dream. Said it had get up and go. I told her, honey, so does my vacuum cleaner. But you don't see me taking that for a joyride. Then came the calls. Oh, the calls. It started with a little bender in the Piggly Wiggly parking lot. Seems backing out in something that low to the ground is a different ball game than her old set-in. Then there was the incident with the speed limit on Highway 17. Let's just say the local constabulary became quite familiar with the sight of a bright red sports car. And the insurance! Mercy me, the insurance! It was more than my first mortgage payment. I told Jerry, I said, Jerry, at this rate, we'll have to sell the good china just to keep that thing on the road. Now I'm a patient woman. I truly am. But a mother's got her limits, especially when those limits involve her pocketbook and the potential for her child to end up in the county jail for excessive enthusiasm behind the wheel. So I started thinking. Now, I'm not one for confrontation. I prefer a little finesse, a little southern charm mixed with a healthy dose of mama knows best. Brenda Sue, she'd come over for Sunday dinner, all proud as a peacock in her little red rocket. And I'd just smile and ask her how the fancy car was treating her, sweet as could be. Then, one Saturday, she called, sounded a little distraught. Seems she'd gotten a flat tire. Now, Brenda Sue isn't exactly mechanically inclined. Changing a tire is about as likely for her as me winning the Daytona 500. So naturally, Mama went to the rescue, with Jerry in his toolbox. We get there, and there's that red Porsche, looking a little deflated, sitting on the side of the road. Jerry gets to work, and I just observed. That spare tire, well, it was one of those little skinny things. The kind that says, get me to a repair shop, and don't you dare go over 40. Brenda Sue looked a little glum. Said it didn't quite have the oomph as the regular tires. I just patted her hand and said, well, honey, sometimes things just change. Then, a few weeks later, the check engine light came on. And wouldn't you know it, the repair bill was astronomical. Something about high performance parts. Brenda Sue started looking a little less smitten with her red speed machine. Started talking about how maybe something a little more practical might be in order. And then, one glorious Tuesday, she called. Said she traded the Porsche in for a perfectly lovely, sensible, you guessed it, beige SUV. Said it had plenty of room for groceries and, wouldn't attract quite so much attention from the highway patrol. Now, I didn't say a word about it. Not one single, I told you so. I just smiled and said, well, Brenda Sue, that sounds practical. But inside, well, let's just say Mama felt a certain satisfaction. Not revenge, mind you, just a gentle guiding hand, steering her back onto the sensible road. Sometimes a mother just knows what's best, even if it takes a flat tire and a hefty repair bill to make the point. That red Porsche, well, it was a phase. And Mama has patience. And sometimes that's the most powerful tool of all. Well, now, you know how it is with young folks. They get ideas, sometimes good ones, sometimes not so much. My Brenda Sue, bless her heart, she's generally a sensible girl, always has been. Good grades, polite, never gave me a lick of real trouble. Until the car phase. Now, we've always had perfectly adequate transportation. Jerry's got his pickup, sturdy as an oak, and Brenda Sue, for years, she drove this perfectly respectable beige sedan, reliable, unassuming, blended right into traffic. You wouldn't look twice at it, and that was just fine by me. Less attention, less trouble. That's always been my motto when it comes to automobiles. But then something shifted. It was like a switch flipped. Suddenly, beige wasn't good enough. Reliable wasn't exciting enough. Unassuming? Well, that became the enemy. Brenda Sue started looking at cars differently, flipping through magazines, spending an inordinate amount of time online looking at things. Sleek things, shiny things, fast-looking things. It started subtly, a comment here and there. Mama, did you see that commercial for that sporty little car? Or, Daddy, what do you think about convertibles? Jerry, bless his heart, he'd just grunt and go back to reading his paper. He figures as long as it's got 4 wheels and gets you from point A to point B, that's all that matters. I'm a little more attuned to these things, though. I could sense a change brewing, a vehicular metamorphosis, if you will. Then came the day. Brenda Sue came home from work, a little too bright-eyed, a little too eager. Mama, Daddy, she says, I did something today. Now, when your child starts a sentence like that, you tend to brace yourself. Is it good news? Is it bad news? Is it news that will require you to lie down in a darkened room with a cold compress? What is it, honey? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. I traded in the sedan, she says, all in a rush. Jerry lowered his newspaper a fraction of an inch. I took a deep breath. Traded it in? For what? For what, Brenda Sue? And then she said it. The words that made my eyebrows head north in a hurry. A red Porsche. And now, I'm not entirely ignorant about cars. I know a Ford from a Chevy. I know that red generally signifies speed, and Porsche, well, even I knew that wasn't your run of the Mill family car. That sounded expensive. And fast, dangerously fast, perhaps. I repeated, just to make sure my ears hadn't deceived me. Yes? Mama, isn't it exciting? She beamed, clearly expecting enthusiastic approval. Well, exciting wasn't exactly the word that sprang to my mind. Conspicuous was closer. Unpractical was another one. Likely to attract the attention of every law enforcement officer within a 50-mile radius also came to mind. I tried to be diplomatic. Well, honey, that's quite a change from the beige sedan. I know! It's so much more me! She declared. Now, I love my Brenda Sue. I truly do. But flashy red sports car wasn't exactly the image I had in my mind when I thought of her. Sensible shoes, maybe. A nice cardigan. But a fire engine red speed machine that felt out of character. Jerry finally lowered his newspaper completely. A red what now? He asked, clearly having missed the initial announcement. A Porsche, Daddy! Red, she chirped again. Jerry just stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked at me. I gave him the slightest of shrugs. What could I say? The deed was done. The beige sedan was gone. In its place was this vibrant, attention-grabbing, undoubtedly costly piece of machinery. I thought about the insurance. I thought about the gas mileage. I thought about Brenda Sue, who, while a good driver, had never exactly struck me as a speed demon. This felt like a recipe for, well, something, and I wasn't entirely sure it was going to be good. But what could I do? She was a grown woman. She'd made her decision. All I could do was offer a weak smile and say, well, honey, as long as you like it, even though inside a little voice was whispering, oh, Brenda Sue, what have you done? That red Porsche. It was the beginning of a whole new chapter, a chapter filled with a lot more color, and probably a lot more drama. Now, you know I'm not one to make a fuss. I believe in being supportive. Your children make their choices. And as a parent, you offer guidance, you offer love, and you try not to let your own personal opinions overshadow their enthusiasm. Even when that enthusiasm involves a vehicle that looks like it belongs on the cover of a magazine that caters to people who wear driving gloves. So, when Brenda Sue unveiled this crimson creation, I did my level best to appear accepting. "Well, honey," I said, trying to inject some warmth into my tone, "that's certainly a color." Jerry, he's a man of few words. He just sort of circled it slowly, like it was some sort of exotic animal he'd never encountered before. He poked one of the tires. He peered into the low, slung interior. Finally, he straightened up and said, "It's low to the ground," which, coming from Jerry, was practically a dissertation on automotive design. Brenda Sue, she was just beaming. "Isn't it gorgeous? The Italian leather, the way it hugs the road, She went on for a good 10 minutes about horsepower and torque and aerodynamic whatnots. Most of it went right over my head. I was more concerned about things like blind spots and how easy it would be to parallel park. Our Piggly Wiggly parking lot can be a real bear. I did manage to interject something about safety features. You know, the important things. Airbags, anti-lock brakes. Brenda Sue assured me it had all the latest bells and whistles. Apparently, it could practically drive itself. Although I wasn't entirely convinced I wanted my Brenda Sue relying on a computer to navigate the streets of our fair town. The color, though. That red. It was insistent. It didn't whisper. It shouted. It was the kind of red that drew the eye from across the street. You wouldn't lose that car in a parking lot. That's for sure. You probably wouldn't lose it in another state. I tried to find something genuinely positive to say. It certainly is visible, Brenda Sue. Exactly, Mama! It makes a statement, and then it did. The statement it made to me was, "Here comes someone who might be a little too fond of speeding tickets." But I kept that to myself. The first time she took me for a ride, it was an experience. The engine made a noise. Not a bad noise, exactly. More of a growl. And when she accelerated, well, let's just say my sensible beige sedan never did anything quite like that. It was brisk. Perhaps even a little exhilarating. Though I wouldn't admit that out loud. I held onto the door handle a little tighter than usual. Brenda Sue kept glancing over at me, a big smile on her face. "Isn't it fun, Mama?" "It's certainly different, honey." That was about as enthusiastic as I could muster. I noticed the other drivers on the road seemed to notice us more. People would turn their heads. Little boys would point. It was like being in a parade, only the parade was just Brenda Sue and her red Porsche. Now, I'm not one for attracting attention. I prefer to blend in, go about my business without causing a stir. This red Porsche, it was the antithesis of all that. It was a rolling spotlight. But Brenda Sue, she was clearly enjoying it. She looked happy. And as a mother, that's what you want, isn't it? For your children to be happy. Even if their happiness comes in the form of a bright red, low-riding, probably attracts officer's sports car. So I smiled. I nodded. I tried to sound genuinely interested when she talked about the suspension and the gear ratios. Inside, I was thinking about the insurance premiums and the inevitable parking tickets. But on the outside, I was supportive. I was Mama, and Mama tries to see the good in things. Even a red Porsche, even if it did make me clutch the door handle a little tighter. It was her choice, and I would respect that, even if my personal preference leaned more towards a nice, sensible beige.